All right, welcome. This is episode 50. Uh, Kind of a big deal. So I wanted to share, and I have Steve on, our founder. We're both founders in this, but we wanted to share a little bit of what has been on our hearts, some of the experiences that we've seen, some of the things that we are going to be doing, some of the vision of what we see coming down the pipe and in the future. And to be honest with you, it's kind of exciting because the feedback, the information, the activities, the events, the community, everything that's been growing has been phenomenal. And so today, our special 50th
Mhm.
episode is really going to kind of focus in on a lot of those different components. So stick with us
Yeah,
because this is really, really cool stuff.
yeah, it's kind of
And welcome,
shocking,
Steve.
Tim, right? We were talking about it like 50. I feel like we're just getting started. I feel like it was just yesterday that we just started this, but we're already at 50 episodes already, which is kind of amazing. I was looking at some stats on podcasts. They say 44% of podcasts don't even make it past 3 episodes. And I'm like, wow, we must be way up there then. We're doing
Yeah.
pretty well. But I think it's not all about stats or even how many people are listening. It's the feedback that we get from people we talk to that have been listening or have been starting to get engaged is just incredible. People love hearing real stories from real people. And I think there's a lot of lives being changed or influenced for the better, right? So
Yeah.
it is exciting, and I do think we're
Yeah.
just getting started at 50 50
Well,
episodes.
but
Pretty
to
pretty good
put it in a
accomplishment, but
timeline, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, to put that in a timeline aspect, we're looking at 50 is well, we obviously produce once per month, or sorry, once per week, and so that puts us at a year. We've actually had a little bit longer than a year because of some of the development, some of the planning, some of the things that were going on, but that puts us at a year of posting. Okay, for those that are out there and very, very specific on numbers, okay, yes, we need two more to make it exactly a year because that's 52 weeks. I get it. I get it. But basically, we've been doing this for about a year. And to have that time of being able to consistently put out someone's story and to have that's a statistic, but to be able to do that for a year, it really has left a deep impact on a lot of individuals. So to kind of quantify how many or what where the feedback's coming from. There's been a couple of things that Steve, I know you have been traveling around quite a bit for some of your events and things like that, and I know that you've gotten some people that have had direct feedback to you at the events. Do you have any of those stories you can share? Because I know there's a couple from LinkedIn. I know I've got a couple phone calls. We've got emails. We've got different pieces and parts. But give you an opportunity to
yeah.
share something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, especially when I'm traveling to different events and things. People say how much they appreciate what we're doing and listening in on these stories and that it's inspiring. I mean, I just had one today. Just a friend called me up and just said, "Hey, thank you for doing what you guys are doing," because he's like, I might not always listen to the episodes or may not always be able to be involved, but um, the 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 concept of focusing on uh, not just letting life happen to you, but writing what you want your life to look like is really important and living a purposeful life. So I mean that was encouraging. That stuff happens it seems like all the time. So I don't have any other specific examples but the nice thing I've seen is like people I think it's the value of hearing someone's story. We
Yeah.
don't often get to hear three aspects of someone's story. Like, what did I think? The format we go through. What did I think life was going to be like? What really changed, or like, what was a turning point that caused a change in how I viewed life and changed my narrative, and then what am I doing now? We usually just see that highlight reel, and everybody's very, very, you know, craving, I would say, that full story and not just the one piece.
Well, I think it adds so much context. For example, I've known Betty, and Betty was one of the ones that we had on our she's done one of her stories and things like that. I'd have to look up to see exactly. In fact, I've got it right here. She is episode number 44. So if you're looking for that, she grew up with a family, and they her parents were deaf, and she grew up in a situation where she didn't think that there was anything really truly different or amazing or wrong, but I thought that that was a pretty unique scenario because she didn't go through any major life trauma. She didn't go through anything that was life shattering, shaking kind of ground that was, and nothing like that. But yet her story was unique in the way that her parents accepted and showed how to be able to live a normal life, even if there is something that might be a little bit different, something that's not a part of every family. And that's a very mild situation story. But then I think back and I look at JD. Now, JD's story, and that's 38, if you want to go back and check that one out. That's on the opposite end of the spectrum. And in JD's situation, his wife was literally trying to kill him, was trying to poison him. And that situation is just like, wow, how would you ever be able to? And his belief, his formation of who he was that, well, I'm married and I'm married for life. And no matter what, I'm going to stick through it. Even if somebody's trying to kill me, I'm going to stick through it. And to me, it's so incredible as we listen to these stories, how we can have two opposites, like almost on two sides of the spectrum here, and yet impact people in many, many different ways. And I think that's why when we look at the story parts, we can start to hear what happened. What was that journey like? How did you battle through, or how did you adjust, or where did you find your source of encouragement? How did you be able to, how were you able to handle the whys of when bad things happen to good people, and when things didn't go the way that you planned it? And sometimes it's a major trauma type experience. And then other times it's just the way that you were brought up. And it was what we would think is a normal life, but yet there were lessons that we learned through that. And that's what I find so incredible about these stories is the impact, the encouragement, the support that we're able to have on so many individuals.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just as meaningful to me to hear somebody that had what we would label a pretty normal life,
Yeah.
compared to like a lot of people that have a ton of really dramatic stories and trauma and really terrible things that happen, right? But the framework is still the same. They make these shifts to go from what they knew or they grew up with, or it's not always even childhood stuff. I mean, it could be things you're doing in your 20s and 30s that you realize in your
Yep.
40s, like, hey, that's not serving me well, or I was just operating under this narrative, and to get to the next level where I want to be, I need to shift. I need to take control of that story. I mean, they're both very meaningful, and that's what's encouraging. Is like if you want to change the world, you change yourself.
Yeah, that's the truth. And it's interesting too. You brought up a very good point. Not everybody's, and I on the show we call them bends in the roads. Not everybody's bend is at the same time. I've
Yeah.
had individuals that when they were talking about their story, it was early teens, sometimes even by 10, 11 time frame, they realized that the way they thought things were going to be were not going to be that way. And they realized very early. But then I've also had other individuals, and I believe it was Kathy that came on. I'm pretty sure it was Kathy, but her episode is 39. And she had a major shift after 50, which is really incredible when you think about it, because somebody as young as 10 having a shift, but yet then there's another shift. And oftentimes we find this to be the case where we have shift after shift in our lives because we expected life to be one way and it didn't turn out that way. And now we have to readjust what our belief level is. Now, I want to say something too, because I actually just recently had a conversation with another individual who has done a lot of the interior work. And we're going to talk about that on the show as well. We talk about the core that creates our actions and our feelings is the belief or the narrative. That's what we call that. Other individuals will use different terms and different words. The way that she replied to it was, that was my perspective of life. So no matter what words you're using, this is all basically the same concepts of why we are doing the narrative is because we have a core belief, we have a foundation, we have a perspective of the way that things are going to go. And then all of a sudden life comes in, for lack of a better word, smacks us right upside the head. And now all of a sudden we're either questioning, are these beliefs true or false? Why or how did I ever end up this way? And what am I going to do to move forward? And it's that moving forward part that really gives a lot of the value to what we do. Hearing those stories, frankly, even telling those stories. There's a whole nother part of just being able to tell your own story that creates a lot of value.
Yeah, I think what you said is right. I think it's that first shift of whatever the big thing was, and it could be any age that you were living under, something that ended up being false or wasn't serving you anymore, and you go write your own narrative, or your own life path, basically. The If it's done right, and I think if you actually, you know, um, let that sink in, that's never going to stop. Like you're not going to stop. It's to be like, oh, I shifted from here to here. It's going to be like I shifted from here to here, and now I'm on a path to keep progressing and keep evaluating and keep changing my evaluating my expectations and how do I want things to be. And I do think people can do this multiple times. You see it in careers
I
and
do.
different things where they take steps that like you're climbing the corporate ladder or whatever. Well, you've got more experience and you're going to a next level of responsibility and whatever else. But in life, it's the same way. Once you have that perspective of, hey, I'm in control of uh, how my life turns out, if I'm not happy with it, or if I have these expectations of where I'm going to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever, and they're not, and the results aren't aligning with where you want to be, you've got the power to continually change. And I think a lot of that actually does tie back to um, knowing your own story, and then the people you surround yourself with. So we talked about that briefly, just like the community that you put around you. If you start to get around other people that are living with that kind of expectation, they're always going to the next level. And you see them and you watch them, not stop. Once they, oh, hey, this life was good. You moved up here, it's great. Well, I want it to be excellent. I want to be, like whatever that next level is. Uh, I want to be around those kind of people that don't stop.
Yeah, so there's two components here, and I want to touch in on both of them because they're two separate thoughts. But I really want to dive into this one here. In all of the interviews that I've been doing, there's this element of personal development, and that's exactly what you just said. There's people we are constantly developing as an individual, and I knew this to be true, and I've actually taught on this, but it resonates as I hear people's stories because there's four specific areas that people continue to grow and continue to become better within themselves. And I'm just going to give them to you. So there's, first of all, is your spiritual, the internal aspect, your soul, that time when you're quiet, the reflective time. You have to be able to listen to your spiritual side. And I've seen a lot or heard a lot from these different stories where, well, I had to actually think, and I had to have some quiet time, and I had to analyze, why was I feeling this way? Why was I going in this direction? So there's that. That's the first one. The second one is the mental. And that's part of our educational process of constantly learning and being in a state of, I don't know everything. And so that the second one is then obviously the mental. The third one is our physical lives. And it's amazing to me that I've actually talked to several individuals that, as part of their shift and part of their journey and to start crafting their narrative, is they implemented something, whether it was a new sleep pattern, a new exercise pattern, a new eating habit. That was all part of the physical aspect that they were continuing to develop. And then the last one, which is what you just mentioned, is the social part of it. There was a statement very long ago, and it's very, very true, is the fact that you are going to become those that you hang around. The birds of a feather flock together. We've all heard that. But if we're not specific and purposeful in who we are choosing to hang around, that influence can go poorly very quickly. We can be influenced to maybe sleep in a little bit later, do a bunch of different things. And I'll give you a real life situation on this because we were talking about crafting our narrative. A friend of mine, we were just teaching a leadership class. And at the beginning of the leadership class, it's always interesting to find out what comes out. And we have a very open dialogue with our class. But the thing that came out is, out of about 14 people that were in the room, all but two set multiple alarms, and they all slept in, and they would set 3, 2, 3, 4, 5 alarms. And so the question came up, why do we do that? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the influence, once we started talking about it, asking, all of a sudden now we're around a group of individuals that are trying to become better individuals, having a good conversation. I heard back from that group 2 days later, they were all still chatting about it. Like, I didn't hit the snooze. I got right up. That kind of stuff that happens because of what we're doing to be able to encourage people to tell their stories and then ask that deep question of, well, why am I living this way? Why am I acting? Why do I feel this way? And to really emphasize the value of these stories, it's really people developing in those 4 areas: spiritual, mental, physical, and social. And those are the core elements that you will hear consistently through all the 50 stories that we've done. People are developing. And then the really cool thing is I asked this, okay, what are the habits that you're doing? How are you practicing this? And frankly, some of them you're going to listen to them like, I'll never do that. I'm never going to be going down that road. Then others you hear like, that's a great idea. Why I need to do that. I need to implement that. And so those are where we find the value in hearing all of these stories.
Yeah, I agree. And this could be a little bit of a tangent, but I'll go down this rabbit hole anyway. So, one thing we get asked, because I think everyone wants to be able to put things in a box, right? We want to be able to label. So what is narrative? What's this podcast about? And so we get asked quite a bit, like, hey, is this like a religious thing, or what's this about? And the answer is no. It's not intended to be at all. But what you
No.
said is, happens when a lot of these stories come back to something spiritual. So somebody has deep religious beliefs as a kid, things change, or they get into adulthood and something spiritual happens too, and they believe, start to believe something different that they didn't believe about life before. Like, hey, there's something bigger than me. There's God, there's universe, there's something. They believe that there's something else out there that's bigger than them. So, it's really interesting that you mentioned all of those things, and they have so much impact on each other. So when you start working on your physical life and you get better at exercise, or you get better at eating, and eating healthier, your mental health goes up too. And all of these
Yep.
different, those 4 categories change. So they all influence each other. And I think that social one is kind of the last one, because you're going to be able to be more authentic and real, and people are going to want to be around you and tell better stories together when you have worked on the other things, the
Well, and
physical, the
notice,
mental, spiritual.
yeah, notice that it's an inside out, and they're
Yeah.
purposely put. I purposely put them in that order. It starts internally with who you are. It starts with the things that you tell yourself, the narrative that you're literally crafting and creating. It starts there, and then it expands out into our social. And without
Yeah.
that specific steps, without those specific steps, the way that you're impacting, the legacy that you're leaving, you don't have any control over it unless you decide, hey, I'm going to take control over the narrative that I want to write for my life.
Yeah, and that that last piece, that social piece, I would add on also the impact that we're always trying to drive is that change in that individual, because I think that's important. You can change how you view the world, what's happening to you, and then you can't really change your family, like your immediate surroundings, until you've figured it out yourself, right? So you have to work on the individual before you can, impact positively your family, and then possibly the company you're working for, the organization you're working for, and then ultimately the community and the world. Like, they're all in that hierarchy. You can't just go out and change your whole community without having worked on yourself first.
And that leads exactly to this point. And we've been asked this question: what is the value of me telling my story? Because I don't have a very interesting story, or because blah blah blah. Like the amount of I don't want to. I mean, I'm going to use the word excuse, and I don't mean that in a negatory type way, but it's really what I've seen. The value of you telling your story gives you a way. Number one, and almost every person that I talk to on here in the green room when we're kind of discussing, they say, "Man, this was really helpful for me to go back and think about some of the things that I did, some of the things that I believed." And it was a very good analytic type exercise for me. One of the other big questions that came up, and I was talking with another individual, he said, "Tim, do you ever have any regrets?" And I was like, okay, let's dig into this. Let's figure out what's going on here. Do you have any regrets throughout your entire life? Do you hold those regrets? Do you wish you would have done things differently? Do you wish that life would have treated you differently? on and on and on that list of regrets could potentially be. And the biggest factor that I found in here is that most of the population tends to live in the what ifs and in the regrets. They allow them to influence all of the actions moving forward. So, well, my dad didn't treat me well, so that's the reason why I am the way I am. Life dealt me a bad hand. That's why I am the way I am. Now, you have power over that. That's one of the false narratives that we often talk about, because you can either choose to regret all of the way life treated you, all of your actions. Yes, you probably made mistakes just like every other person did. Or you can choose to say, I'm going to take accountability at this point, because each day I can start fresh. I can start new. And so all of the stuff that has happened in the past, and this is one of the biggest, most powerful messages that we like here at Narrative, is yes, there could be a lot of mistakes. There could be a lot of bad things that happened in the past. But starting today, I can change that future for my kids. I can change it for my family. I can change it for my own life. I can change it for my community. I can start right now, and I can now create and craft a true narrative, one that I believe in, one that I'm passionate about, one that I can say I'm proud that I left a legacy behind of this narrative. We can actually say that that's the value of being able to craft and tell your own story. But you have to go back and analyze where you're at in order to be able to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't change the past, but you have to understand how it's affecting you today. And I think it's important not to live 100% in the future too. I do believe in having,
Mm-hmm.
goals and aspirations and targets that you're moving towards, but really, I want to affect today. The only thing that you have control over is today. You can't change the past. You can't predict the future, so you have to be able to affect today.
Well, let me give you this one more statistic, and then we'll. This is kind of the reason why, right? There was a psychologist, Stanley Milgram, and he found that 80% of the population, I personally think it's more, but 80% of the population do not have physiological or moral resources to be able to make a decision on their own. And what does that mean? It means specifically that they don't have control of their own story. They don't have the ability to write and craft their own narrative. So if an authoritarian person or someone in authority comes in and says, you need to do this, even though it is immoral, illogical, it's wrong in every aspect, if we don't have control of our narrative, then we are going to fall prey into just doing and being whatever it is that somebody else wants us to be. And it was interesting to me as I look at that and saying about 80, 90, my guess is maybe closer to 90% of the population is living that way. Just like what you said earlier when your friend called you and said, well, I'm just living, I'm just working. I really don't have a purpose. I really haven't thought about my purpose. And wow, now if you actually take time, write your narrative, it's a small population, but the more that we share our story, the more we tell our story, that influences others to tell their story, which then influences people to really take control of that and then hopefully increase that percentage to 20, 30, 40, 50%
Mm-hmm.
of people that can really think and craft and make decisions on their own.
Yeah, that emotional intelligence is huge, and reminds me of another story just had with one of my kids, and they had a decision to, pretty big decision to make, and they were leaning one way, and then the next day I asked them about it, and they were like, "Oh, I'm not really sure now. I might not do it after all." Well, what changed? Why? And it ultimately just came down to like that indecisiveness and not having the confidence in the decision that you're making based on what you're supposed to do or what
Mm.
you're perceived as supposed to do. So that the value of using that emotional intelligence for decisive action is super important to me. Like, because I look at some of the younger generation, at least just my own kids and teenagers, it's like you can ask them a question and they don't know. And the answer is, I don't know. It's not yes, it's not no, it's not maybe. It's like I don't know. Well, why don't you know? Like, and sometimes I do wonder, is that a result of some of the narrative of like, I just don't want to make this decision because I don't want to make
Mm,
it wrong or something like that.
yeah. Yeah, and there's so much that we can look into and talk about and actually go down, but the influence of knowing your story, which is again, that's part of the emotional intelligence, is understanding who you are. And then the second part of emotional intelligence is understanding how that influences and how it impacts, and understanding how their stories all kind of weave together. That plays into how successful you are at work. It plays into whether you get a promotion or not. It plays into the tightness of your relationships, if they're going to fall apart or not fall apart, if they're going to end in conflict, if they like, there's so many different pieces that come together in order to be able to craft and create this narrative, that it's almost endless. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about this stuff, and in fact, we probably do, probably too much. So, but here's our takeaway, and we want to go back to this one. There's definitely value in hearing stories, so we appreciate the listens. Obviously, that's part of it, and the more that you listen, the more it's going to help you craft and create, which then is our desires. We want you to be able to tell your story, and we want you to reach out to us. We do have a Google form that we will put in the notes, that if you would like to apply to tell your story, we'd love to be able to go through those and be able to have a chance to kind of help you. One, be able to, if you've never told your story, I'm more than willing to spend a second with you, a couple minutes or whatever, to be able to actually look at that. It will truly be a healthy experience, and then be able to share that with others, potentially to change a human life. There's really no greater legacy that you can leave other than that. To change somebody's life for the better, to have a positive impact, man, that's the legacy that we all desire.
Yeah, absolutely. And not everybody is going to tell that on a podcast, right? So we invite you to do that, but maybe it's just having coffee with a friend, you know, and being able to tell your story and ask about their story. Get somebody else to. People love to talk about themselves. So, I mean, maybe the step though is like to proactively find one person to tell your story to, and then ask about theirs.
Well, and that leads us directly to the post that you made on LinkedIn about how many people want to sit around a fireplace and how many people would like to be able to share your story. So that is our community. That's exactly where we're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, tremendous response. So, I mean, kind of leading into uh, uh, that post, it was just, I was just asking like who would want to sit around a campfire and, and hang out basically. And there's a ton of response. So I was like, okay, uh, let's do an event. Let's put this thing together then. So we're actually doing the first ever narrative, and this one's a guys event. So it's going to be the Narrative Men's Leadership Summit in Gaylord, Michigan on April 27th. Probably about a month away from when this episode actually airs. So there's still time to get involved in that. We've got three great speakers coming in, talking about how to craft your narrative and the impact that has on from a leadership perspective. And then we've got time to actually, we're doing dinner together, basically splitting up in groups, having dinner, getting to interact with other guys and hear their stories. And then we've rented out a resort on the lake. We're gonna have bonfires by the beach and games and drinks, beverages, snacks, all that stuff. Literally just time to hang out, network, hear other people's stories, and it should be a great time. So we'll have the link for that as well in this episode, and that's one way to get involved. Coming up very soon.
So the question is why? Why would anybody want to be involved in that? And I know that you get that asked that question because I've heard you talk about it. So I'm going to ask you that question directly. Why would I want to go to your event, Steve?
I, to me, it's not. I don't even have to explain why. The response I get when I just tell people I'm doing it, they're like, "Oh, I'm in. I want to go." And so it's. I think the desire is there. I think people are longing for true community, like-minded people that actually want to, proactively tell their stories and be around authentic people that are doing the same thing. So, the it sometimes it comes down to more like logistics, like, hey, can I fly in
Yeah,
from Texas to get to northern Michigan? That's the reason they don't want to, might not be able to come. But everybody in my network that I've talked to about this, they're like, this is amazing, I would love to do this, I'm going to try to make it. And we encourage you to do it. Like, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of impact out of this, and networking, and amazing things happen when you put you know good people in the same room, and like-minded people that are
absolutely.
actually moving towards the same goal. And it's not the same goal of necessarily a material thing or possession or you know success, yes, but what is success? So it's deeper than that, and we talk about like what is success. That's one of the sessions that we'll be doing. So I encourage everyone to try to make it. I think it's going to be phenomenal, and it's going to be a good time. Some people haven't had the Northern Michigan experience like you and I have, Tim. So we're going to do some outdoors stuff, and it should be really, really fun.
Yeah, and I think there's two big benefits. One is the fact that it's not going to be like a regular conference where you just get a talking head up there. Yes, we're going to have speakers, but we specifically chose and working through the speaker aspect of we want it to be interactive. We want there to be a good dialogue. So yes, there's going to be that component, and there's going to be a little bit of teaching and a little bit of instruction. But more importantly, it's the connection that we create with those that are in that community. Hence the reason why we're doing fireside chat type stuff and giving a chance for people that maybe would have never met before to be able to come together. And everybody is moving towards that same purpose of we want to become better. We want to develop ourselves personally to be able to leave a deeper impact on the world, to be able to have a stronger legacy. And so there's all of that stuff. Yes, we're going to have again, the link in the notes. So that way it's there, it's available. We are still looking for some sponsors. If you're interested in sponsoring parts of things, like we would love to be able to have you as part of a sponsor in that. And I know it's only about 30 days out, so they might be filled, but they may not be. So make sure you contact us about that. There's a lot of action steps that you can take away from this. I'll let you, if you have anything else to share other than that, I'm going to jump right into the action steps.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple takeaways, like from a practical standpoint, how do you get involved? I mean, you can, one, tell your story. If you want to be on the podcast, fill out the application. Two, we'd love to see you face to face at the Leadership Summit. There's nothing better than meeting in person. I mean, in my opinion, those are just the best when you can meet somebody face to face. And then three, as you mentioned, Tim, support us financially, whether that's a sponsorship of the event or a podcast or just in general. I mean, it takes resources to fund this and keep it going. And some people want to just support financially and say keep doing what you're doing because it's having an impact. So
Mm.
all of three of those things are ways that people can get involved.
Yep. Yep. And that's pretty much all I got for the rest of this. I mean, let me share this though, because I'm actually kind of excited. We've got a couple of stories that are coming up that are pretty phenomenal. Everything from an individual that grew up in a small town to, to actually become, she likens herself from a country mouse to a city mouse. And that was her journey. And then we've got others that actually faced murder, not assault charges. Anyway, they were going to be murdered. So I don't want to give away too much, but we've got some stories that are coming up that I'm pretty excited about. So you got to listen. We're going to have these come out once a week, but if you know of somebody that is on a podcast already or telling a story, has a book, whatever, feel free to recommend. It doesn't just have to be you. We would love to have you, but it could be somebody that you're looking at that you could potentially recommend as well.
Yeah, sounds great. I think that's all I had.
All right. So those are listening again, we are on YouTube. Make sure you go over, check us out. Make sure that as you listen to these things, you are working on crafting your story, writing your story, because every story matters. Every person individually, they matter. And so your greatest asset, your greatest legacy that you can leave is the story that you're crafting today.